Sol 3 is a tiny, damp rock situated in the uncharted backwaters at the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy. It is inhabited by a carbon-based bipedal lifeform who possess the unique ability to be simultaneously terrified of their own mortality and yet unwilling to stop consuming the processed food and alcohol that actively accelerate it. Cognitive function is suboptimal and still largely controlled by a primitive organ called the amygdala. They are a species whose primary contribution to galactic culture is the concept of anxiety. One of the most egregious entries in the human databank is their relationship with their canine slaves. The Encyclopedia Galactica defines the dog as a wolf that has been subjected to a rigorous program of genetic humiliation. In the private sector of human life, where logic is generally treated as an optional extra, the human has decided to share its habitat with a predatory carnivore. But not a competent carnivore. Instead, they have engaged in a multi-millennial project to turn a majestic apex predator into a trembling, wheezing, emotional sponge. Humans, in their infinite wisdom, decided that the wolf, a creature designed for stamina and lethality, was simply too efficient. So, they genetically engineered its face to be so squashed that it could no longer breathe without making a sound like a broken accordion. They did not breed these creatures for health. They bred them for cuteness, a human term meaning resembling a human infant that has been dropped on its head. They selected for wide eyes, flat faces, and a complete inability to survive in the wild for more than 12 minutes. The result? The Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, a dog whose brain is frequently too large for its own skull, and the German Shepherd, a creature engineered to have the posture of a sliding board, guaranteeing a life of orthopedic agony. Humans claim this is friendship. The guide, however, notes that friendship usually involves two consenting peers, not one party exploiting a genetically induced mental disability in the other. And it is a disability. Human geneticists, when they aren't grafting human ears onto the backs of mice, have discovered that domestic dogs suffer from a mutation on genes GTF2I and GTF2IRD1. In humans, this corresponds to Williams-Buren syndrome, a disorder characterized by a lack of social inhibition and an inability to perceive danger. Essentially, the dog is not loyal. It is chemically incapable of judging you. It is suffering from a compulsive friendliness disorder. The human ego, fragile as it is, relies on this brain damage to feel worshipped. They want a relationship where they are the deity and the other party is biologically programmed to be the admirer. The mechanism of this bond is remarkably similar to what Earth psychologists call Stockholm Syndrome. They kidnap a puppy, isolate it from its kind, and assume total control over its food, water, and defecation schedule. The animal, realizing that the human is the capricious god of the food bowl, bonds with it to avoid starvation. That tail wag? It's not love. It's an appeasement signal. It's the behavior of a prisoner trying to keep the warden in a good mood so the dried food pellets keep coming. When the human leaves the domicile, the dog experiences separation anxiety. Humans view this as a sign of affection, but in reality, this is a panic attack triggered by the sudden disappearance of the survival mechanism. To the dog, the human is simply a vending machine with legs. When the vending machine walks out the door, the dog naturally worries it may never eat again. And then there is the hygiene paradox. Humans are a species that will scrub their hands for 20 seconds to avoid a microscopic germ, yet will happily sleep in a bed with an animal that cleans its genitals with its tongue. They walk behind these beasts, picking up their warm excrement with nothing but a thin plastic bag and a grimace, a ritual that a casual observer might assume is some form of religious penance. They let the beast lick their faces. In the wild, This behavior is a solicitation for regurgitated meat. The dog is asking for vomit. The human, in a display of breathtaking delusion, calls it a kiss. When confronted with these facts, the human will usually become defensive. "But I rescued him," they cry. "He was a poor, destitute animal locked in a kennel. I am a hero." They stubbornly fail to see that rescuing a dog from a prison constructed by other humans is merely acting as the laundry service for the breeding industry. By validating the concept of pets, the human ensures the supply chain of misery continues. There are no stray wolves, because wolves are not manufactured products. If you offered a dog a choice, a concept impossible for them to grasp given the brainwashing, between option A, the life of a wolf, running, hunting, mating, being an actual animal, or option B, the life of a pet, sitting in a drywall box for 9 hours a day, eating brown pellets and waiting for permission to pee, it would choose option A every time. But humans don't want an animal. They want a prop. They want a furry, emotional sponge to absorb their existential dread. They want a slave they can pet. They call it love. The guide, however, simply notes that if you must genetically engineer a biological organism to tolerate your presence, perhaps the problem is you.